In 2016, thousands of people gathered in one of London's most famous venues. They weren't there to watch a football match. They had come to see a woman who claimed she was about to change the future of money. Her name was Ruja Ignatova.
This network was created to become and to fuel the growth of OneCoin, which I strongly believe will be the #1 cryptocurrency worldwide.
Dressed in luxury and surrounded by dazzling lights, she walked onto the stage as the crowd cheered with excitement. With complete confidence, she made a bold promise: OneCoin will be the Bitcoin killer. The crowd believed they were witnessing the beginning of a financial revolution. New currency, a new future, and a chance for millions of people to become rich. But behind all the excitement, the reality was completely different. In October 2017, Ruja Ignatova boarded a flight to Athens and disappeared. She left behind one of the biggest scandals in the history of cryptocurrency. Billions of euros in people's money from around the world had flowed into the OneCoin project. Later, the FBI placed her on its most wanted list and offered a multi-million-dollar reward for information leading to her arrest. But the most fascinating part of the story isn't simply her disappearance. It's how millions of people came to believe in a dream that had already played out in a remarkably similar way nearly 400 years earlier. To understand the story of OneCoin, we have to go back to a time when people were willing to risk their fortunes for something much simpler: a flower. In the early 17th century, the Netherlands was one of the world's wealthiest economies. Global trade was expanding. Cities were becoming richer, and a strange and luxurious flower had arrived in Europe from the Ottoman Empire: the tulip. At first, tulips were valuable because they were beautiful and rare. But then something changed. People were no longer buying tulips simply because they wanted the flowers. They were buying them because they believed the price would keep rising. A market emerged where contracts for tulip bulbs were bought and sold before the bulbs had even been harvested. People weren't really buying the flower. They were buying the opportunity to sell it later at a higher price. Economists later used a concept known as the greater fool theory to describe this kind of behavior. The idea is simple: I know I'm paying a high price, but someone else will be willing to pay even more later. For a while, that is exactly what happened. Prices kept rising. More people bought in, and the rising prices attracted even more buyers, until suddenly, everything stopped. In February 1637, buyers disappeared. The market collapsed. Historians today debate the true scale of Tulip Mania and its impact on the wider Dutch economy. But one important lesson remained: when the value of an asset depends more on the expectation of future price increases, bubble begins to form. And bubbles aren't created by technology alone. They're created by human psychology. Nearly 4 centuries later, the world faced another major financial crisis. In 2008, banks collapsed, markets crashed, and millions of people lost trust in the traditional financial system. Then, a radically different idea emerged: Bitcoin. Introduced by an anonymous person or group using the name Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin presented a new concept: a digital currency that could operate without a central authority, without a bank controlling every transaction, without a government controlling the supply of money. Instead, Bitcoin relied on blockchain technology, a public ledger system in which transactions are verified by a global network. For many people, this was a major technological breakthrough. But as the price of Bitcoin began to rise dramatically, something much older than the technology itself began to reappear: human excitement. At first, many people were fascinated by the technology, but gradually, the questions began to change. People were no longer asking, how does this technology work? Instead, they were asking, how much money can I make from it? Stories of people becoming millionaires overnight flooded social media. Everyone was searching for the next Bitcoin. This psychological force has a name: FOMO, the fear of missing out. People were no longer afraid only of losing money. They were afraid of missing their chance to become rich. And this is where speculation begins. The same emotion that had driven tulip buyers in the 17th century had now returned in the digital age.
OneCoin is easy to use. OneCoin is for everyone.
Ruja Ignatova understood the psychology better than most.
Make payments everywhere, everyone, globally.
She understood that many people weren't looking for technology.
And this is who we are, global citizens of a small world.
They were looking for a dream, a shortcut, a way out of their financial problems.
Wanting to make a change.
In 2014, she launched OneCoin. She presented it as the next generation of cryptocurrency. She compared OneCoin to Bitcoin, and she promised investors that they were standing at the beginning of a financial revolution. But there was one fundamental difference. Bitcoin operates on a public blockchain. Anyone can examine the network. Transactions are transparent, and the code is publicly available. OneCoin was different. It did not have a public, independently verifiable blockchain. The system was controlled by the company itself. Investors believed they were buying into a revolutionary digital asset, but the reality was very different. They were trusting numbers displayed within a system controlled by the very company selling it. The bitter irony was that millions of people believed they were investing in the future of technology, when, in reality, they were investing in a story. Between 2014 and 2019, OneCoin defrauded investors around the world of more than $4 billion. Then, in 2017, Ruja disappeared. The OneCoin story is extreme, but the psychology behind it is remarkably familiar. Throughout history, humans have repeatedly fallen into a similar pattern. New technology appears, a new opportunity emerges, prices rise. Confidence grows, and people begin to believe this time it's different. Sometimes it really is different. The internet changed the world. Blockchain has created important innovations, and artificial intelligence may transform entire industries. But every revolutionary technology creates another opportunity too. The opportunity to sell a dream. Because the biggest bubbles in history aren't created by technology alone. They're created by emotion, greed, fear, hope, and the belief that there will always be someone else willing to pay a higher price. The story of OneCoin doesn't mean that all cryptocurrencies are scams. Technology itself isn't the enemy. The problem begins when excitement replaces analysis, when promises become more attractive than reality, and when people stop asking, what is this really worth? And start asking, how much higher can the price go? From tulips, to internet stocks, to cryptocurrencies, the names change. The technologies change, but human psychology remains remarkably similar. Because after 400 years, we may have created new forms of money, but we're still learning the same old lesson. The most dangerous bubbles in history aren't created only in the markets, they're created in the human mind.